Hello, welcome back to my channel. So, you might have noticed that there wasn't a video for the actual end of the second week of March. There wasn't. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it 2 days late, and then I tried to record it and it got all muddled. And then we were in the middle of Margaret's the Word Nerdathon. Like, well, I'll just wait until the end of the Word Nerdathon, and then I'll include those books. And then my internet stopped working last night when I was going to do the recording for that. And so here we are, almost to the end of the third week of March. And I still haven't done an update for the second week of March. So there's that. Also, I didn't finish any physical books off my shelf for the second week of March. Did I finish books? Yes. Did I finish lots of books? Also, yes. Did I finish any books I can actually show you physically? No, I didn't. I finished, more than a book a day for the second week of March. But yeah, no, I actually did very badly when it comes to reading the books off my shelves so far this month. As a matter of fact, out of the books that are actually on my shelves, as opposed to the library books that I, finish and print and turn in, I still only have one book on my stack for this month that I finished. It's very bad. So I do definitely need to start focusing on print books. Is that going to happen? I hope so. In the meantime, I'm going to tell you the books that I finished for the last week and a half, and talk a little bit about them. And then I am going to show you some books. Not in as much detail because they're for next month's TBR, but I'm introducing the idea now as I start building next month's TBR. So you guys can join in if you want, or come up with similar games for yourselves. So first the books I finished, and then we'll get on to the cool stuff for next month. So at the end of the first week of March, I had finished This Other Eden, Yellowface, and The Words That Remain. Those all were finished at some time in March 7th. Some of them were earlier or later. But all of them were very good books. This Other Eden and The Words That Remain are both shorter. So an audiobook, if you're reading them at normal speaking speed rather than the slower speed that most audiobooks are recorded at, they don't take very long. They're very good. This Other Eden by Paul Harding, I already knew to expect that one was going to be short, because I've read several of his books in print from the library, and they're always rather short books. He's an excellent author. If you haven't read Paul Harding, check him out. This Other Eden is his current release, and it's general lit fiction. I won't tell you too much about it. It's too short to really tell you much about it without spoiling too much. But good literary fiction. The Words That Remain by Stenio Gardell is a book from the Dublin Literary Award long list. It was interesting. I'm probably not the intended audience for it, to really give it a 5-star and be enthusiastic about it. But definitely a good book. And if you like books that are in the LGBTQ theme, this is definitely in that span of books. For me, I just couldn't relate to the characters very well. But the idea of, people that are coming of age as gay men in their society and what that means and how that works. And yeah, it was very good. Just a very heavy book. And yeah, not a 5-star read for me. Just, yeah, I didn't get into it enough to do 5 stars. On the other hand, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang was a 5-star read. That one, I've heard a lot of criticism about it in chats, but mostly it's second or third hand criticism, not the people actually reading it. And, okay, a lot of the criticism tends to be along the lines of, well, why didn't it include this, that, or the other? I don't expect a novel that is telling a story to cover all of the elements of a nonfiction book on the issue, whatever the issue is. I just don't. A novel is telling a story. It might include elements of an issue area that deserves further discussion. But its job is not to lecture, it's not to teach, it's to tell a story. And if you want to learn more about that subject, there are nonfiction books galore on any subject that you can find to read more about it. Or talk to people that are involved in the issue. And yeah, there are other ways to go about learning more. I do not criticize a novel for not including all of the elements and perspectives on an issue in telling their story. So I'm quite happy to dismiss quite a lot of the criticism along those lines about Yellowface, because it's not fair to expect an author to stuff everything into their novel. It would belabor the story to the point where it wouldn't be really a good story anymore. So Yellowface is definitely a good book for anyone involved in the book world. I highly recommend it, and I could really relate to this one, because being new to BookTube, I'm a lot more like thinking about my role in the book world all over again. I've been in the online book world for a while, not nearly as much as I'd like to be, and hopefully I'm making inroads to doing more. But yeah, it definitely is something where I could relate to it. I could see where I fit in the periphery of the story, and not talking about me, but certainly I'm in there somewhere. Yeah, so I don't know if people that are not involved with BookTube or reviewing books or anything would relate to it quite as much, but I think a lot of people still are really enjoying Yellowface. I highly recommend it. I read or listened to the audiobook of Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. This is book 1 from the series that I read book 2 of last month. Everyone on this train is a suspect. And I read book 2 in print with my eyeballs because I got it as a Goodreads giveaway book. So I read the book that was actually sent to me. So then I went back and did book 1. It doesn't require that you read book 1 to read book 2. The series is definitely one where you could read either book first, and it won't affect your understanding of the story. They're both good. I didn't feel like I had anything spoiled from reading the second book, or that I was missing anything by reading the second book first. So that's part of why I'm willing to read books out of order when I get them as giveaway books, because I want to see if that works. Some books it really doesn't. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading whatever Benjamin Stevenson comes up with next. I didn't like the first book as much as the second book, so it got 4 stars, but still a good book. And I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy his series. I finished Holly by Stephen King. This one is one that I will not require a penalty row on for my genre blanket. I actually won't require it for several of these, even though I didn't read them in print. The Words That Remain is on a list that I am very pointedly reading this year. So however I can find the books, it's amazing how hard it is to find books that are on these awards lists. Like, how are people ever supposed to read them if you can't access them anywhere? So if I find them, I read them in whatever format I find them in. There's no penalty if I happen to have to do audiobook or ebook, even if I'm trying to read things on my shelf. Same thing reading the first book in a series I've read later books in. Or reading, books that are ebooks or audiobooks in order to get to the ones that I have on my shelf. Those are not penalty sorts of books. Holly, I started as an audiobook last year in October and didn't get very far into it. So I restarted it this month and made it all the way through this time as an audiobook. I did pull up the ebook for a couple chapters, but it was mostly audio. And I've read all of the books that precede this one. So I already know all the stuff that involves Holly and the other people that she's involved with in the previous books going into this one. And I definitely recommend that if you can, because there's a lot of information in her backstory that makes Holly, the book, more interesting, because she's not just a peripheral character that all of a sudden gets her own book. So the Mr. Mercedes series, Needful Things, and I think Finders Keepers all include some stuff with Holly. But yeah, definitely read some of them, if not all of them, before you get to Holly. Then I finished Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I know this is on a list, maybe more than one list, that I'm supposed to be reading. So again, it doesn't have a penalty row. This is good. Braiding Sweetgrass does get a penalty row, but I'm agonizing over that because it was a pointed recommendation. Following, and I still don't remember the name of this book, following my reading of another book that I was reading on sprints, and Leandra recommended that I read Braiding Sweetgrass, Firekeeper's Daughter by Angelina Bolle. So Firekeeper's Daughter is about Native American young people dealing with drugs and the drug distribution issue on their land in the northeastern U.S. So Braiding Sweetgrass is more central U.S. rather than getting up in towards the Canadian border, but still similar plants. And the sweetgrass part, the sweetgrass element does extend into the tribal culture that's in Firekeeper's Daughter. Braiding Sweetgrass is nonfiction. I gave it 5 stars. I did really enjoy it. There were some elements where I got a little bored, but I've also read or watched or been involved in quite a lot of Native American stuff. So some of it was stuff I already knew and didn't really need a whole chapter on. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. Good book. Thank you, Leandra, for that recommendation. And then I did 3 Anthony Trollope books in a row as LibriVox audiobooks. So The Warden, which is Chronicles of Barsetshire, number 1. I read that one 5 or 6 years ago, so it was a reread. I didn't remember most of it, so it was good. I reread it. And then book 2 is Barchester Towers. I think I have that on my shelves somewhere. So that may be the one book that when I find it can go on the finished books stack. That would be satisfying. And then book 3 is Dr. Thorne, which a lot of people in sprint chats were saying was really good. I did enjoy it, but not enough to bump it up a star. But all 3 were rounded up to or actually sat at 4 stars for me on Goodreads. So not a terrible series so far. It is better read in order, and reading one book by itself definitely did not give me enough about the characters for me to care about them, but it's not as painful as I thought it was going to be. I do need to get to book 6 by the end of this month for points for a game on a Goodreads group. So I finished my first NetGalley book in many years, If Our Bones Could Talk, a novel by Melissa Quitadamo. This one was a 5-star read for me. Young adult protagonist, historical fiction, crime fiction. It was set in New Orleans, yes, and involves Sicilian immigrants in New Orleans in the years after the U.S. Civil War. Definitely a good book. I don't remember off the top of my head when it was or will be published. And if I click on it, I'm going to lose my list. So I will be doing a separate video about my NetGalley reading at the end of this month, because I haven't done that for years. So I definitely will be talking about my foray into NetGalley in 2024. Okay, back to my books. The next book I finished was The Long Way to a Small Hungry Planet by Becky Chambers. I did 2 Becky Chambers books back to back, both of them the first books in their series. So Long Way to a Small Hungry Planet is the first book in the Wayfarers series, which is sci-fi. They're in space on a spaceship. And then A Psalm for the Wild-Built is also sci-fi, but it's not really a space sci-fi. It just has robots in it. It's futuristic with robots, but they're on Earth. So that one was really good. Both of them were 5-star reads for me. I love sci-fi. I think if you're not as much into sci-fi, you're going to like A Psalm for the Wild-Built better. And it is shorter by quite a bit. It was 160 pages rather than 500 some pages. So if you want to try Becky Chambers but aren't sure, start with A Psalm for the Wild-Built and go from there. I will be finishing both series, for sure. The next one I went to was Swordheart by T Kingfisher. This was a recommendation from Tori, one of the hosts for the Time Realm, which is my realm, for Realmathon. This was absolutely hilarious, good book. Thank you, Tori, for the recommendation. I'm glad that I read this one. This is my second T Kingfisher book, so I didn't get to use the new to me author prompt on this one. Very sad. But I liked this one too, so I'm going to be trying out more T Kingfisher. This is the second book I've tried by this author, and I liked both of them enough to give them 5 stars. I've not done any of their horror yet, just the fantasy. So I don't know if I'm going to like the horror as much as I like the fantasy. I'm not a big horror reader. Really the only one I've read in the horror genre would be Horror Store so far this year, which I did really like, but I'm not sure that I'm even reading more of that author for a while, let alone adding more by yet more horror authors. We'll see. The last book I finished that I've checked off on Goodreads so far, and I haven't gone in to put in my next NetGalley book that I finished while the internet was out last night. So that will be in a future video. But I finished How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe by Charles Yu. This book is a great segue into the second half of this video, because this is a book all about time travel. So they're in a sort of a bubble universe, a universe where there's a time loop going on, and he has to figure out how to get out of the time loop or what's going on, or and there's a time machine involved. And I am playing with a sort of a time machine for April 2024. In April 1st, 2024, I will be traveling back to April 1st, 1997. And I will be staying in April 1997 for the rest of April. Which means I will be finding out what I would have been doing, what I would have been talking about as a booktuber in 1997. There was no booktube in 1997. So this is, alternate reality that we're delving into here, which is what my book stack that the photo for this video is for. Now here is the beginning of my TBR for April. And how did I arrive at this, you ask? Well, you might not have asked. So I signed up to be in the Silver Snakes in the Old School April readathon next month. And once I started thinking about it, I was like, well, what would count as nostalgia that I want to get into in April? I was thinking, well, I could do when I graduated from high school, or I dropped out from high school and went to college, so that year, that would be 96. And I was supposed to have graduated in 97, so my graduation years would be somewhere in there. And then I thought more about it, like, well, I could do the top books from the year I would have been graduating high school. That would be great. And then if I'm going to do videos about that, I should be dressed in 90s clothes. Well, what does that even look like? It's so hard to make a costume about the decade that you learned about clothes in. So if you grew up where you were trying to dress fashionably in high school in a particular decade, that's what clothes are. That's just baseline clothes for you. For me, that is the 90s. I was in middle school and high school in the 90s. So the things I think of as clothes are just that was what they were. Sort of. When you start actually looking at it, there are things that have changed. My jeans fit so much better now than they did in the 90s. And that's one of the things I'm not changing for April. I might, if I find them cheap, I'm going to be going Goodwill bin shopping this coming weekend. So I might find some more 90s style jeans that are like cheap, very cheap, that I'm willing to add to my collection for April. But otherwise, I'm sticking with things that actually fit. Mostly. Although in the 90s, we tucked everything in. Like, we had to have space in our jeans to tuck in our shirts. So things that fit really well might make it harder to tuck in our shirts. That's going to be a sticking point that might make me get a few more 90s pants. Anyway, I'm going to be in 90s costume, reading 90s books. It has to have been published before 98. I'm not reading anything that came out after 97. So, Robert Ludlum's Apocalypse Watch is one that came out within my target years. So anything pre-Apocalypse Watch I can read. I haven't read any Ludlum, but I know in the 90s he was a big deal. A lot of the guys especially were reading Ludlum. So I will be starting Ludlum next month. And I probably will start with the earlier ones and work up to this. But I can't go past 97. This is a I can't even remember what we call it now. This is a book that came out before 96 that would have been an author people were reading. The Book of Ruth by Jane Hamilton. And as a booktuber now, I'm not just reading the current books, but I am reading the books that fit with what's currently coming out. This definitely feels like it goes with some of the other books I've pulled that are from 96, 97. So I will be reading this. I read Map of the World much closer to the 90s, and I liked it. So I'm looking forward to this one. Mishner did the novel. Let's see what year this came out. I know I looked at it. 91. So this is a 1991 James Mishner. Anything before 96 works. I haven't looked at all of my other Mishners to see which other ones work. I know I have a lot of James Mishner, though. But a lot of them came out after 96 and 97, too. Angels and Insects came out a few years before my target year, but the movie was coming out in, I think, 96, maybe 97. So they made a movie about this book that was coming out in my target year. So, of course, if the movie's coming out and I haven't read it, I should read this book. Joyce Carol Oates had a new book coming out in 96, and I think maybe in 97 as well. So it would be a good time to be reading some of her older books, too. This is a short story collection by Joyce Carol Oates. It's called Raven's Wing. I've had it for a while. The Deep End of the Ocean was one of the top books from 1996. One of the books that's been popular since 96. It came out in 96. It's from Oprah's Book Club. And I believe I'm going to be doing this as a buddy read with Coda. Assuming that works out. I haven't done much actual buddy reading, so hopefully this works. We're also going to be buddy reading Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I really like Daphne du Maurier, so I'm looking forward to that. And that's another one that came out early enough that it's not a problem for this project. I don't know anything about this except that I've heard from several people that there's a really good movie that goes with this book. So this is by Jacqueline Mitchard. The Pope's Rhinoceros, which I believe is on the Dublin Literary Award library list. So from a past list. This one came out in 96 or 97. In Murder Mysteries, this is from 96, and I will be looking at my other books that are bound up like this because I have a feeling this is what I'm going to be looking for my hardback mysteries. I don't know anything about Marcia Muller, but it's a murder mystery, and I'm going to need some of those. The Diamond Age by Neil Stevenson was the current Neil Stevenson back then. And I haven't read it. I know enough about it that it's maybe slightly spoiled for me by now, but I haven't read it. The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje. This book I've been meaning to read forever. It's on the Vauxhall's 1001 Books You Must Read Before You Die list. And it came out in 96. And it was a big deal when it came out. And I'm pretty sure the movie came out around then, too. I don't remember if there was much of a lag between them. And then another Vauxhall's 1001 Books list from 96 was Fall on Your Knees by Anne-Marie MacDonald. Also a book from the Oprah's Book Club list. So I don't know what all my TBR is going to be, but that's the beginning of it. And it'll give you some idea of what I am going to be doing in April. I will be trying to stick to the theme as much as possible in my videos. I will probably be doing a little bit of, this week in 1996 or 1997. I haven't decided if I'm sticking to 97 or kind of somewhere between 96 and 97. But we'll see. Yeah. So it's still a work in progress. Some of it I'm going to work out as we actually get into making videos in April. But it should be fun. If you want to play along, pick a year, figure out which books you need to read to be in that year. Don't have to do the whole month. I'm quite sure that doing a whole month of time traveling into the 97 is going to be interesting. If you just wanted to do a week or, a vlog's worth, if you do vlogs, could be fun. But that's what I'm doing for Old School April. I will be trying to fit my books to the prompts for Old School April. And I will also be trying to find movies and other things from that time. It's a little tricky. I only have Netflix and YouTube. And I don't have the paid YouTube. So I don't have a lot of the streaming services to find a lot of the old stuff. So we'll see how much I can actually access. But I wasn't actually keyed into a lot of pop culture back then. I was not one of the popular kids in high school. I read a lot, and I was a nerd, and I broke all the curves, and kids didn't like me that much. I had my own little group, and I was friends with the international exchange students. That was my group. So, it was, I didn't do a lot of the pop culture stuff. Most of my pop culture I got from the international exchange students group. So it wasn't necessarily what American kids were doing. And then in college, I did my first 2 years as a physics major. So there was so much homework and it was so time consuming that we did study groups where we actually studied. And we would be doing homework sets until midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, pretty much every night. So I didn't do much pop culture until I finished, trying to be a physics major. By the time I got to my next choice of degree, we were getting towards the end of the 90s anyway. And so I don't remember a lot of pop culture. It was there, but I wasn't engaged in it. So this should be an interesting experiment. So I will catch you guys in a video fairly soonish, since I've already talked about several of the books that I finished in the 3rd week of March, since this is such a late video. I will probably combine the next weekly reading update with a bit about either Netflix or maybe, if I get to the rest of them, the Anthony Trollope books. So I will catch you in the next video. And if you do a lot of the live sprints, I'll probably catch you in live sprints soon. Talk to you later, guys. Bye!